So we've been going through the wisdom literature this summer, and I have slightly bad news for some of you. Pastor Luke kind of mentioned it earlier, and so he took away a little bit of my thunder, but students, you are only a couple of weeks away from going back to school. And that kind of means that summer is wrapping itself up, which means that our summer series is somewhat wrapping up. Now, if I'm honest, this is going to go somewhat like most series that I preach go. We will go a little bit beyond the summer break, right? And there's so much more that we want to learn. I have really enjoyed this wisdom series. Whether you have or not, doesn't matter a lot to me, because I get the privilege of just preaching the word, and this has just been really a very exciting series. Last week, I was glad I only had to preach that message one time. I was happy it was a combined service. And I actually enjoyed the opportunity to preach that message. There was a lot that we needed to learn from it. If you weren't here last week, here are the two main points we looked at. You'll remember like 2 weeks ago, we talked about the voice of wisdom calling out in the streets, screaming out, almost like a stadium vendor, saying, "Follow my ways." The voice of wisdom is the voice of God. Last week, we got introduced to two additional voices. The voice of wicked men, and we found that the voice of wicked men isn't like this group of guys that you have to walk down the street and you're like, are they the wicked men? Are they the wicked men? No, the voice of wicked men is the voice of anyone who would draw you away from the will of God. That's the voice of wicked men. Then we also looked at the voice of the adulterous woman. And this is why I said I was glad I only had to preach the message once, because we went into talking about this voice. And the voice of the adulterous woman is the voice that leads to immorality. Any voice that is going to lead you away from God and towards immorality is what is described in the Proverbs as the voice of the adulterous woman. As we wrapped up, challenged you. If you're struggling in your marriage and you're hearing a voice that is saying, you know what, just call it quits. You know what, just throw in the towel, regardless of what that is. Or maybe you're not even to that point, but if you're struggling, we say, rather than getting to the point where it feels like there's no return, let's get some help. We also went into talking about pornography and the grip that has on many people's lives. I was not surprised that as many left last week, they told me stories, even in the line, because I didn't honestly think that I would hear many people talk to me about this just in the receiving line at the end. But many people said, you know what? That was a struggle of mine, or that continues to be a struggle of mine. And thank you for sharing what God's Word has to say about that. I mentioned to you last week that I was going to put on the NorthWinds Hub some resources for those who are struggling in marriage, and also resources for those who are addicted to pornography. If you've been on the NorthWinds Hub, you might say, it's not there. And you'd be right. Because here's what happened. I went into this week and I thought, this cannot be all that difficult just to put together a list of resources for folks. But I'll tell you, it was a challenge. And here was the biggest challenge. The challenge to find resources for marriage was not all that difficult. Now, taking the time to write out. So when I give instructions, I like to give detailed instructions. I don't like to just say, hey, have at it, good luck, hope you do all right. I like to give very detailed instructions, and so my instructions for marriage are like 2.5 pages long, and they go like this, like here is a website, here is where you click, here are 3 good articles to start with, here's how you go about watching these videos, or if you're reading articles. So I'll give you a little insight into how you watch a marriage video, or how you read a marriage article. Okay, sometimes we have this tendency, oftentimes, especially married couples, have this tendency to either read articles or watch videos related to marriage with a magnifying glass. And the magnifying glass is all about like, how could my spouse use this? This is for you. And so what I have written out is that you need to read these articles, watch these videos with a mirror. God, what do you want to do in my life? What do you want to challenge me with? Because the reality is, as much as you might want to change your spouse, you can't change your spouse. You can't change anyone. Only God can change a person's heart. But you can allow him to work on your heart. So the marriage resources were not all that difficult. And I have a lot of them put together and ready to just put out there. The challenge was to find those resources that didn't cost an immense amount of money for those who are struggling with addiction to pornography. There are a lot of resources out there, but a lot of them are very expensive. And at least from my perspective, if I was going to expect a large number of you to use these resources, I probably couldn't put out something that's going to cost you $50, $75, $120 a month. As much as you might want to rid yourself of that addiction, I was certainly genuinely concerned that the price would be something that would hold you back. So I've actually found a resource, but what I'm doing is, in order to give good instruction, I am like, and this is so weird, because I had to sign up as if I was addicted to pornography. And I'm like, wow, I've never even had to consider this, what this would look like so every day they send me an email, and I'm like, all right, so this is good stuff. But I want to go through here, and I want to be able to say to you, here's what you do, here's where you click, here's the resources available to you, here's how you use those resources. So I'm still learning, is I guess what I'm saying to you. I'm still learning so that I can, to the greatest degree possible, say, hey, if you want freedom from that addiction, the addiction to pornography, we will walk through that with you, and here's a resource for you. So, Lord willing, middle of this week, we will have that out there for you. I will send an app alert when it is ready. So, I didn't forget about it. I actually probably spent way too much time this week on it. And I told Kim, even as it got to the last couple of days, I'm like, oh my word, the amount of study I still need to do in order to be ready for Sunday is immense. So, but we're ready. And we're going to go into, this morning's message is all about the wisdom of obedience. The wisdom of obedience. And if you have your Bible, go ahead and turn to the book of Proverbs. We're going to start in Proverbs chapter number 1 again. We're going to work our way through a number of chapters, but Proverbs chapter number 1, I'm going to read verses 8 and 9. I want to let you know, right up front, whenever Proverbs is written, it's Solomon who's writing it, wisdom given to him from God. And he writes in such a way that he says oftentimes, listen, my son. Pay attention, my son. Here are words of advice that I have for you, my son. And so you find 15 times in just the first 7 chapters, 15 times in 7 chapters, he says, my son. He addresses his son. We're going to look at the very first time that he does that, starting in verse number 8 of chapter 1. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They, talking about your father's instruction and your mother's teaching, will be a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. 2 pretty clear instructions here, right? You need to listen to your father's instruction, and you need to not forsake your mother's teaching. I think there's very little question that there is an implied obedience here. I don't think any father would say, hey, I just want to make sure you heard me. Don't really care if you do what I said. I just want to make sure that you heard me. So, for instance, since we're getting ready to go back to school, let's take a conversation that might take place before school. Dad says to either a child or a couple of his kids, hey, when you get home from school, here are the things that I want you to do. I want you to take out the trash. I want you to unload the dishwasher. And I want you to do your homework. Seems like the kids aren't listening. So Dad says, did you hear me? Yeah, Dad, I got you. We got you. Kids get home at 3:30. Dad gets home at 6. Kids are playing video games. Dad says, "How come you didn't take out the trash? How come you didn't put the dishes away? Doesn't look like you did any homework. Didn't you hear me?" "Well, yeah, I heard you." "Oh, you mean you expected us to do something with that?" Well, there is an implied obedience to, here is what I'm saying this to you. I want you to listen to me. Then I want you to do something about it. So when Solomon says, listen to your father's instruction, he's not just saying, open your ears and then do something different. Obedience is implied in this instruction. Listen to your father's instruction. Do the things that I'm telling you to do. Avoid the things that I'm telling you to avoid. The second part of verse 8 says, do not forsake your mother's teaching. In the same way that obedience is implied with the word listen, I think there's a certain time element that is implied with the phrase, do not forsake. This is not like, hang on to this for a day. Do not forsake your mother's teaching is probably not for a day. It's probably not meant for a week. Probably not even meant for a month or a year. I believe the implication here is to hold on to what you've been taught. What you've been taught, let that stick with you when you're 14, 17, 21, 35. Let your mother's teaching stick with you. This word for teaching is actually the same word for the Torah. Let what is being taught, the Torah is the law, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Let what I'm teaching you, let what I'm instructing you, let it stick with you. He then follows that up by saying your father's instruction and your mother's teaching, if you will follow that, it'll make you look good. A lot of focus is often placed on like back to school shopping, right? In fact, I would imagine that over the course of the next couple of weeks, a number of the families in here have trips planned specifically for back to school shopping. Now, I grew up in a time when back to school shopping could have looked like looking through a Sears catalog. That's kind of dating myself, right? That's not what back to school shopping looks like anymore, right? You might go to Amazon. You might go to some other online store, but a lot of times it requires a physical trip to the store. And there's often this idea of what are the latest trends? This is going to be my first day of junior high. I have to look good. This is going to be my first day of high school, first day of my senior year. Anything honestly in between. This is my first day. I have to get this right. Right? Even though you've gone to school with the kids for however many years, it's like it's the first time they're ever going to see you or something like that. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about the illogical way in which we view things. That's not what this is about. But a lot of times we do some back to school shopping, and Solomon would say, you know what? You'll actually look the very best if you go to school following your father's instruction and your mother's teaching. I can see some of you right like, yeah, okay. That'll do it, Pastor Dave. I'll just, follow my dad's instruction. I'll listen to my mom's teaching. And yeah, they won't make fun of me at all. You seen my mom's style? We won't talk about dad's style. I mean, dads, we can just wear a t-shirt, a hoodie, and whatever it is, we're good, right? And I know, like you say, Pastor Dave, it doesn't really work that way. If I don't have the trendiest clothes, I'll get made fun of. If I don't have a different pair of shoes for every outfit, I'll be left out. And I'll just say, I know this takes time, and it takes continuous reinforcement. But parents, it's wise to teach your children of all ages that their worth, their value doesn't come from peer acceptance. Their worth is intrinsic. It is God-given. And to students, if your worth is tied to peer acceptance, you will always be one decision away from rejection and ridicule. I want you to think about that for just a moment. I know I'm speaking way too logical, but this is the book of Proverbs. This is wisdom. The reality is, if your self-worth, if your value is tied to peer acceptance, you are always one decision away from rejection. But if you understand that your value is intrinsic, and you say, Pastor Dave, we're not in school yet. Don't use words like intrinsic. Intrinsic simply means it is not something to be attained. It is something you already have. You have value and you have worth because God has given that to every one of you, to every one of us. He has given us our self-worth and our value. Most adults have come to realize that character counts more than cosmetics, that integrity has a greater impact than your image, that kindness matters more than your kicks, that acceptance matters more than accessories. And I'll stop using more plays on words. If you didn't pick those up, then you probably should have. I could keep going with a lot more of them. Now, I will be honest, I'll give you a little hints. I had to use a thesaurus to come up with some of the words so that they could match up with, the S's and the A's and the different things like that. The I was the hardest one. I'm like, oh man, what word can I use for I? And so anyway, I'll stop doing that. But I do need you to know this. Who you are matters more than how others perceive you. Who you are matters more than how others perceive you. And this is about, and there would have been a time that I would have said, you know what, your reputation is everything. I've actually gotten to the point where I tell people they need to stop caring about their reputation. Now, before you say, wait a second, Pastor Dave, I don't think you want to be saying that, and I especially don't want my kids hearing you say that. But think about this. Your reputation is actually not something you can completely control. Your reputation hangs on the perceptions of other people. Now, what you need to always protect is your integrity. Always protect your integrity. But even Jesus lived with perfect integrity, and with a number of people, his reputation was not good. So if Jesus went around trying to protect his reputation, he would have never gone in and eaten with sinners. No, that will ruin my reputation. He always acted with integrity, and so we need to make sure that we understand the difference between living with integrity and living in such a way that we just try to protect our reputation. There is a big difference, and there is an immense amount of peace that comes from being able to lay your head down at night and say, I lived with integrity, even if people have a wrong view of you, because you can't control that. You start trying to chase everyone who has a wrong perception of you. No, let me tell you what really happened. No, you'll drive yourself crazy, right? And so we need to make sure that we understand that who we are matters more than how others perceive us. And this again goes back to students and adults. We need to understand our intrinsic value, God-given value, just because of who he has created us to be. Now, I want to back up a little bit. And I'm going to stay on the same principle. I taught verses 8 and 9 from the perspective of a child or a teenager or even a young adult. I want to now teach it from the perspective of a parent. Let's play a little game of fill in the blank. Listen, my son, to your blank instruction. What's the word? Fathers. Thank you. One person knew the answer. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction. Second one should be easier. Do not forsake your blank teaching. Thank you. Whew, man. Don't forsake your mother's teaching. All right. So your father's instruction, your mother's teaching, parental responsibility cannot be ignored. Parents, you are the primary teacher for your child, for your preteen, for your teen, for your young adult. You say, whoa, whoa, whoa. They turned 18 on their own. You want to take that approach? That's not wise. I know that that's a common thing. They're 18 now. You should never abdicate your responsibility as a parent. Yes, it looks a little different. But you should never just step away and say they're on their own. Whatever they do is fine. I'm no longer responsible. That is unwise. And again, parents, you need to be the primary teacher of values to your children. Do not abandon your role. Solomon is about to give very specific, very wise instruction to his children. Parents, you should begin this when your children are very young. And you shouldn't abandon your role when they develop a strong will. Because some of your children will develop a very strong will. You also shouldn't abandon your role whenever they become preteens and they start to roll their eyes when you talk to them about values and when you talk to them and give them instructions. And you shouldn't stop teaching when they just turn their heads away from you or they leave their earbuds in whenever they are teens. By the way, you're the parent. Tell them to take their earbuds out. No, they don't want to. All right, teens, I'm just going to be kind of blunt with you for a second. I know I'm not your parent, but I would give about 5 seconds for the earbuds to be out and put away before you no longer had earbuds. Now, your parents are probably nicer than me. So if all they're asking is that you take them out, then you should probably do that. But parents, just because they stop wanting to hear from you doesn't mean you should stop speaking into their life, because the moment you stop speaking into their life, I assure you there's a lot of other voices that they're hearing. So if the only voices that they're hearing are the voices of wicked men that we talked about, those leading them away from the will of God last week, or the voices of the adulterous woman leading them into immorality, you can imagine the path that they are going to go down. Don't abandon your instruction, even when they declare their independence as an adult. Parents, be willing to speak lovingly into your children's lives. Look at the first instruction in Proverbs chapter 1, verse number 10. It says this, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not give in to them." Listen, students, you are going to face temptation. Sometimes that temptation will come from a friend. Sometimes that temptation will come from the popular kids. Sometimes that temptation will come from a teammate. This word entice, if sinners entice you, it carries with it the idea of being seduced, being drawn in by something that seems very attractive. Parents, you know this, you've experienced this. But yet there's a failure to teach this to our children, that things that look good are not always good. That the popular kids aren't always following the narrow path that leads to righteousness. That the teammates aren't always going to encourage your child to do what's right. Well, they won't listen. Whose responsibility is it to instruct and teach? Mom and dad. Whose responsibility is it to listen and not forsake the teaching? That's on the children. So don't abandon yours. If they abandon their responsibility of listening, just know that you have still done your job. You need to be speaking into your children's lives. You remove the possibility of listening when you fail to properly instruct your children. You don't even give them anything to hold on to. You don't give them anything to forsake or be given the instruction to not forsake when you abandon your responsibility to teach. Now, children, teens, young adults, there is great wisdom in obedience. And I know that you don't like me standing up here and saying it. I know I sound like a parent. The reality is, and you don't realize it maybe yet, but I actually sound like a very wise man. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back. I only say that because I'm reading the scriptures. And sometimes wisdom doesn't sound like something you want to hear. And trust me when I say, as an adult, there's plenty of God's wisdom that sometimes I don't want to hear, but I still need to hear it. Parents, in addition to there being wisdom in your children exercising obedience, there is wisdom in you continuing to teach. I know it can get frustrating. I know it can feel like you're talking to a brick wall. I know it can feel like it's just a waste of your time and your breath. Maybe if I save my breath, I'll live a little longer and they'll listen later. I don't know. Parents, don't abandon your responsibility. For all of us, we need to understand verse 10. When we are drawn in by the seduction of sin or sinners, we need to make sure to not give in to those temptations. Verses 11 through 14 explain kind of the pitch. You know, like, hey, here's why you should come and do this wrong thing with us. It'll be fun. We'll come out better on the end. Like it'll be a great time. But Solomon addresses his son again in verse 15. Look with me. He says, "My son, do not go along with them. Do not set foot on their paths. Don't even start going the same direction. Don't set foot on their path." Students, I know that you're going to be faced with this as you look to go back to school here in a couple weeks. Some of you, I know because my kids were athletes, I know that you started official preseason practices August the 1st on Friday. And I know that as you started those preseason practices that there were already those temptations to just fall into bad habits, to start using the language that you were using whenever the school year ended. But being around your parents all summer and away from those influence a little bit, you started to not use that language anymore. And then boom, like you're right back there with those buddies. And so it's just like, I'm going to go right back into my old ways. Don't even set foot on their paths. Don't go the same direction. And I know I've been talking a lot to students with school about to start, but this instruction is good for all of us as adults as well. How often do we just say, as verse 10 says, we just go along with them? How often are we afraid to make waves as an adult, to push back against popular thinking or culture? It might be office talk, you know, that I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to let that go. It might be, what they used to call water cooler talk. It might be gathering around the coffee machine, lunch breaks, whatever it might be. But we don't want to cause any difficulty. We want to just go along with the flow. And listen, there is a right time and a wrong time to have conversations. I think we all understand that. Use wisdom there. But how often are we afraid to do the very same things that we're asking our kids to do, to use the right language, to stand up for the person who is being talked bad about? Yeah, it doesn't just happen in school. It happens in the workplace. It happens in the offices. It happens in families. This part of the family talking about this part of the family. You know what? Why don't we stop talking bad about them? Why don't we stop putting them down? Why don't we try to encourage them? Why don't we maybe figure out a way to build a bridge that has been torn down previously? So it's not just about our students. It's about us as adults as well. Understanding that there is a draw. Just go along with the flow. Just come along with us. Just do what we're doing. It'll be easier. It'll be more fun. You won't cause any waves. Boss won't notice that you're like some religious fanatic, whatever it might be. Just kind of go along with it. Students, parents, all of us, we need to stay far, far away from sin instead of cuddling up real close to it. Well, the next time that Solomon addresses his son is in chapter number 2. Let's look there together. I'm going to read 8 verses this time. It says, "My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding, and if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He holds victory in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. For he guards the course of the just and protects the way of his faithful ones." Here we see it again. Accept my words. It obviously carries with it the idea of letting parental instruction sink in and become a part of your life. It then says, store up their commands. Store up their commands. We're kind of in the midst of canning season, freezing season. Things from the garden are kind of coming in. You only store those things that have value, right? Those things that will be useful, and we find them to be important later on. We store them because of their value for the future. Some of you can remember something that you've stored up from your parents. I can remember, this is very simple and not overwhelmingly life-changing or shattering, but I can remember my dad teaching me which way the nut comes off of the bolt when I was just a small child, right? Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Right? And that has stuck with me over the course of now 40-some years. My son was changing his oil when he was down at Cedarville, and he's like, "Dad, I can't get the bolt out of the oil pan. I can't get it out." And I said, "Well, which way are you turning it?" He's like, "Well, I think that I'm turning it the right way." And I said, "Okay, listen, just keep in mind, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey." Well, when you start getting under and things are flipped upside down, it does become more complicated. I will acknowledge that. But it's something that stuck with me. And honestly, it has been very helpful, and every time that I look at a bolt, believe it or not, I think righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Just very simple. I don't think clockwise, counterclockwise. I just think, all right, this is the way that it's got to go. We store up things of value. When you kill a deer, you don't just leave it lay out in the woods. You freeze it. You have it processed. And then it's useful later on. I always know whenever we're running short on deer meat because my wife says, "Hey, it's about time you get a deer, isn't it?" And I'm like, it's not like I'm trying to not get one. It's just not being very successful here lately. Why do we store up commands? Because they are useful for us in the future. Again, students, you might not understand everything your parents are saying. And there is the occasional time that your parents are wrong. Not very often. And it's not your job to point it out. But store up their commands. You will find later in life, it might be later this year, it might be 5 years from now, you might not even realize it for another 20 years. But you will realize that the commands that you were given, godly instruction, will be worth it. Look at the further descriptions in chapter number 2, starting in verse 2 through verse 4. Turn your ear to wisdom. That gives the idea. I'm a little bit hard of hearing, I really am. And I sometimes use that to create jokes with people, but I really am hard of hearing. And if you've ever been in a conversation with me, especially if there's a lot of background noise, I'm like looking at you. I'm trying to read your lips, and I'm turning my right ear, which is my better ear. I'm kind of trying to watch you, and then I'm trying to listen just as well as I want to hear what is being said. I'm turning my ear. It says, turn your ear to wisdom. Desire that someone speaks into your life. Find that person that will do that. If you're an adult, find someone who will speak into your life. If you're a child and you have parents who are giving you godly wisdom, turn your ear, eat up more of it. Soak it up. It says, apply your heart to understanding. Call out for insight. Hey, can someone give me some advice here? Dad, can you please show me the way? Mom, can you please help me along? Cry aloud for understanding. Look for it as for silver. I've seen some of you search for Easter eggs. I've seen my kids search for Easter eggs. My brother just had a birthday party for his twin girls. And he went through and he hid like sunglasses. It had like a scavenger hunt, sunglasses, like a little pencil stick thing. There were a number of other things. Well, you know how it is when you hide things. You forget where you hid them. Well, they knew how many things they had hidden, and then the kids were done, and we knew how many things were missing. So now we as adults, we're out there, and we're like looking. My brother sends me a text a couple of days after this party. He said, found a pair of sunglasses, hid them with my truck. But you know what it is to like look for something. Like if I knew that there was a $20 bill, I don't care what stage of life I am, I'm always going to value $20. Quite honestly, I'm going to value $1. If you told me that there is $1 taped underneath one of these chairs, I would look under every single one until I found that $1. I did that before this. No, I'm kidding, I didn't. I was like, there's going to be people looking underneath there. But look for this wisdom like you would look for money. It is valuable. You need it. Search for it as for hidden treasure. You can see a contrast between what is culturally expected of children and teens and what is actually beneficial. Most parents expect their kids not to listen to them. Most people think that teens don't want to be instructed. But the reality is that we have to have such confidence in them that we continue to instruct them. It's largely expected that teens will resist all efforts of instruction and especially correction. But students, I want you to hear this. The best thing you can do is seek out godly instruction and godly correction. It's why you should want to be at youth tonight from 6 to 7:30. It's why you should want Pastor Luke to teach you hard things. It's why you should want your parents to have high standards for you, not low standards for you. You should want your parents to have those high standards for your friends as well when they're around. If you'll seek these things out, look at what the result will be in verse number 5. It says, then you will understand the fear of the Lord, and you will find the knowledge of God. And when you do, verses 6 through 8 say, you'll find victory and protection as you go throughout your life. If you're a competitor, there's nothing more that you like than victory. You want to find victory in life, follow the ways of God. There is great wisdom in obedience. We're running a little bit short of time, so I'm going to read 2 more passages. Not going to elaborate on them a ton, but let me read 2 more. Again, I said 15 times in 7 chapters, Solomon addresses his son. I'm going to flip over to chapter 4. Start reading in verse number 20. It says, my son, pay attention to what I say. Listen closely to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them, and they are health to a man's whole body. Go over to chapter number 6, and the same exact set of verses 20 through 22. So we read 4, 20 through 22. Now we're going to read 6, 20 through 22. My son, keep your father's commands, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Bind them upon your heart forever. Fasten them around your neck. When you walk, they will guide you. When you sleep, they will watch over you. When you awake, they will speak to you. God's word often pushes us against expected norms. We would all be wise to pay attention, to listen closely, to hold tightly to godly teaching. But I know that goes against what we naturally expect. Common behavioral expectation. God's word is going to push against what is commonly expected. We would be wise to keep the commands of our fathers who are pointing us toward following the Lord. And once again, don't forsake your mother's teaching. I'll wrap up with a focus on verse 22 of chapter 6. We see here that when we walk, these instructions guide us. But what comes next might be the most surprising. It says, when you sleep, they will watch over you. I believe this speaks to the peace that comes from doing the right thing and living with integrity. I said it earlier. I conclude by saying it now. You can't completely protect your reputation, but you can always live with integrity. Every last one of us. And there is great peace that comes with living this way. You ever done something wrong? And as you laid your head down at night, you wondered, somebody going to find out about this? And then for days and sometimes weeks and months, you just wonder when the dominoes are going to fall. And what you thought you had hidden is going to come to light. We've probably all been there, right? There's a complete lack of peace. But when you live with integrity, there is a peace that you can lay your head down at night and you can go to sleep. And as it says, when you sleep, this wisdom, your father's commands and following them, following your mother's teaching, it will protect you. There's great peace. So here's the thing. I encourage you to choose wisely. You're going to choose obedience in following instruction, or are you going to choose your own way? Really two paths, and that's the whole thing through Proverbs. There's the way of wisdom, and there's kind of the common way. I would encourage you to go God's way. Father, thank you for your word. Thanks for challenging us to obedience. And I know that there was a lot here challenging students and children and young adults, but the reality is that every one of us needs to be challenged to obedience. Obedience to what you have in front of us, God. Obedience to your words. And maybe many of us were raised by Christian parents, and we need to still look back and hold tight to and store up those godly instructions, that godly teaching that points us toward you. I pray that in ways in which even right now there is resistance building up in the minds and the hearts of some who have heard your word this morning, I pray that you would tear down those walls of resistance. In ways in which some of the students are saying, none of my friends listen to their parents. I don't need to listen to mine either. I pray that you break down that wall. That is unwise. I pray that you would help them even at a young age when they maybe shouldn't possess as much wisdom as what they could. I pray that you would help them to seek it out as if it was that one Easter egg that had $5 in it. What you have for us is of great value. May we follow you and choose obedience. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.